they're communicating with us. So we're about to end a little saga here, and we've heard close to 8 vocalizations. All quiet.
We go back to 1971, 72, give you a little timeline on our information and the recordings and what happened to them and where things stand today. I'd like to credit Bob Gimlin, who's here somewhere, and Roger Patterson with being, indirectly my nemesis. It was on account of an investigation of the Roger Patterson film and I was a newspaper reporter at the time when Peter Byrne, who you may have heard of, he's not here with us today, was going back into the Bluff Creek site to make some measurements and size up the Patterson film, estimate the size of the creature and one thing and another. The story came out of Bluff Creek about a nest. And I was working for the Record Searchlight in Reading at the time, and I drew the assignment to go investigate the nest. And I got in touch with Peter Byrne. He was looking at the same thing. And we never met in the field, but he got a hold of me afterward and said, Al, I heard this strange story that came out of the Sierra. I haven't got the money at the time to go down and check it out, and it really sounds preposterous. But if you'd like, well, I can give you somebody's contact if you'd like to go see what you can make of it. And I took the option. As a consequence, basically the way the story started was Warren Johnson, one of several deer hunters, and his brother, son, Ron Morehead, Bill McDowell, had a camp up in the rooftop of the Sierras, and they'd go up there during the deer hunting season each fall. And beginning in 1971, something began interacting with them, coming into their camp area during the night. And Warren made some pretty crude recordings, tape recordings of the sounds. He sent them back to Ivan Sanderson back in Minnesota. I think it was Minnesota. Sanderson was a cryptologist, a scientist, in fact, but he gathered a lot of stories about the abominable snowman, and one of his publications was called The Abominable Snowman. In any event, Peter Byrne was in touch with Sanderson, and Sanderson had sent him Warren's letter. His wife had it, in fact, and said, "What do you make of this?" Peter said, "Well, it sounds like something that we ought to look into. It doesn't sound like it's very credible. It sounds preposterous, in fact, but nevertheless, maybe it's worth checking out. If it's real, then it's going to be a real discovery." So that is where I came into the picture to go and make the discovery. I got to know Warren, I got to know Ron, and some of the others. They invited me to go into the camp with them, and I packed a recorder on my back. It's about anywhere from 4 to 6 hour hike up into this area, and difficult to get to. There are no roads, a couple thousand feet above the nearest highway, and I was there a couple of times before anything happened. But on one night, lo and behold, the creatures, or whatever it was, came in and around camp. And it's kind of fun to follow Rich and John, because the initial sounds that I heard up there were rock sounds, the sounds of sticks or limbs breaking, rather violent sounds. Not what you'd expect from a deer or a bear walking through the woods. And anyway, we made these recordings. You're going to hear a couple of them. and we're going to make it short because we're on time here. Where it went from here, I did what amounted to a semi-continuous recording on 2 nights. I sent the best of this back to Syntonic Research in New York, who is the audio acoustic company that investigated the Nixon Watergate tapes. And the president of that firm was kind enough to review the sounds and suggest to me that I try to get a hold of a university to who could give them analysis that he might be able to provide, but only at a great expense. So that began an odyssey, which lasted several years. In the meantime, after about 1.5 years of holding on to these and trying to find someone to provide some analysis, well, I opted to let the story out. And so I released it to the San Francisco Chronicle. The LA Times picked it up, Sacramento Bee picked it up. Then a lot of the KGO, a lot of the radio and television stations picked it up. And I ended up on the In Search Of program. We're in reruns. The sounds have been broadcast in various venues and on various media since then. In any event, in 1977, an engineer at the University of Wyoming stepped forward and said he'd take him on. So he and a graduate student studied them for about 1 year, and he wrote a professional paper which was delivered in a public forum, academic forum, up at the University of British Columbia in 1978. And at this point, my time and patience in researching it any further, pretty well worn out. It was pretty well worn out, including my pocketbook. I had to go get a job. So I went back to school and retired to a more reclusive sort of life out in the Nevada desert, being a geologist. And that took me completely out of the picture for about 20 years. So anyway, in coming back and coming to these conferences, I think the hope is, we somehow, some way, there's some progress made in the field of discovering what can cause this sort of phenomenon. Ours is specifically sounds. Of course, we had footprints, we had the hair, we had scat. Some of these sounds are very close in. That are big. I heard them. I had a visual perspective of the area at the time they were occurring. There's no explanation for them except that they're made by something that has a very talented voice and is capable of projecting it. And I'm going to turn this over to Ron here. He said, let's have some fun with this. So we're going to play some sounds for you, and he can kind of describe what's going on, and if you've got any questions afterwards, we'll take them.
Well, as Al said, I was one of the hunters up there. I don't hunt these creatures, though. We were deer hunters. Al recorded some very clear sounds one night, and we produced them on a CD, which this is his story right here, and did that in 1996. Jonathan Frakes of Star Trek narrated this thing. But I'd like to play this first little spit of sounds for you, and it's a very aggressive sound. This was done in 1972 by Alan. And we think probably during those first periods of 71, 72, they were maybe trying to frighten us off, because the sounds are very rapid fire, very aggressive sounding. There's some chest beating sounds, which you won't hear those on this little spit here. But why don't you play number 1, Jason, and just let me listen to that. You might want to hold yours in this too. That's it. We think that was a male and female having a little spat. Again, I guess I did have the chest beating. That sounds like chest beating. We didn't see these creatures doing that sound right here. Like Al said, he was in earshot of it, or eyeshot of it, but he couldn't see anything. They're extremely elusive, extremely intelligent, and again, we underestimated everything they were doing. I mean, we thought we were smarter than them, but really, we're not so sure about that. We think we were studying them, basically. I think maybe they were studying us. And my belief in this is that you got to make them curious. If you can make everything I've heard this morning, from Tom to on through, it all seems like one general idea. And that they have to trust you, like most animals do. You have to be somewhere a long time, and they have to feel comfortable in your presence. On the same, I don't know if it's the same night or different night, but Alan got these things whistle. And this whistle was responded to by Warren Johnson. And I think it's the first real interaction we had where they would come back to us. And this was done in '72. The whistles, I might note, have multiple harmonics in them. It's been established through the University of Wyoming. Our whistles don't do that. They seem to have a talent for doing some very interesting sounds. A very flexible vocal mechanism is what we believe. Could you play the second one now, Jason?
I point out this is Warren.
This is Warren Johnson, by the way, whistling back. You'll hear whistles back and forth and hear him talk a little bit. These next sounds were made 2 years later. We're still going to the same place and still trying to get something going of these things. And June of 1974, Bill McDowell and I went up there on horseback with the mules. We used to go in a few days earlier than the other guys to kind of get camp ready and stuff, because we could pack stuff in with mules. And on the way in, something scared the animals, which what we think anything unusual about that. It could have been almost anything, a rattlesnake, bear, or whatever. But on the trail end, we found a big track, and then I knew, okay, these things are just perpendicular to the trail too. So it might have been that this spooked animals. Anyway, when we got to, wait, let me back up. In June, this is deer hunting I was just talking about, but in June we had re-roofed our shelter. Our shelter is a group of trees that goes in a kind of a circle, and the door is 2 trees that are shaped like that. And that's what we go in and out of. On the top, we had a crossover with cables. Looks like a big beaver's nest. Got some dry deadfall on top, and then we put plastic over it to keep the rain out. Then we'll put some brush over that, alders from this very close by. Well, we had done that this June, and by September when we went in, those were dried up. But okay, that's when I found the track on the trail. And when we got into camp, these things started. It was just about dusk, about 7 o'clock. Big limbs breaking, rocks popping. We knew they were around, because then we heard some whooping sounds, which were a lot different than the sounds we was hearing in 1972 and 71. We don't know really what the change was there, because the sound became less aggressive and more interactive. And this is the night when I personally got to go and show them, so did Bill. It was a very active night, and my personal thoughts on whooping sounds, which I hear a lot of reports of, is that it's a signaling device between the creatures. Because the whooping sounds can sound different. And I've got 3 different types of whooping sounds right here. You'll hear the one kind, then a different kind, and then the very last kind, which was the last whoop you'll hear, was the very last thing they did the night of 1974 when we were there. Number 3, Jason. Those whooping sounds. A lot of people said they've heard whooping sounds, and anyway, that's the whooping sounds that I recorded. That very night, the last little spit I'll play for you here, we had started calling back to them, and we heard a lot of chatter going on, and I yelled out, and they yelled back, and we'll play that for you in a second. But I want to continue. The next morning, these things had gotten to camp before we got there, so they knew who we were. This little bit of their intelligence level here. The reason we knew that is because the next morning we found 2 things. We found a couple of fresh alders that had been twisted off over by the spring and put up on top of our shelter. And we found a track right by our shelter door. And Bill McDowell's lens cover off his rifle had fell on that track. And it was leaning up on it, so it hadn't been mashed down. Therefore, the track was there before we were there. So they knew where to go. They knew who we were. This is like an 8-mile trek. It's not an easy way to get in. I mean, it's really a hard place to get to. Either these sounds represent something very significant in the nature of these creatures, or it's one of the most elaborate hoaxes ever put on. Because how anybody could have done what they did is still a big question. We don't know what these things are, but I hope, and like Alan says, that collectively we can make something happen to make a discovery without having to bring in a dead body. I don't ascribe to that at all. We never thought of that. We did carry guns. It never seemed to make a difference up there because our attitude wasn't violent. It wasn't, we had fun, really. Basically, the hunters I was involved with were just having fun with it. Al came up there very professionally. He's got a science background. He's got a degree in science, and he thinks that way. We were just having fun. We didn't realize the significance of this until later on, and so we've been talking about it, and we've been doing interviews the last 30 years now, it seems. And we sure like to be at the bottom of it, like everybody in this room, I think. And I think if we know where a bone was, we should dig it up. And it might violate something for one thing, but it would also make a discovery that might protect a lot of them without shooting one. This last, number 4, Jason, we play that. You'll hear one cry out. Bill will say, "Are they trying to talk to us?" And then you'll hear one cry. Now, I'll say something back, and listen to the very, in my opinion, very ape-like chatter that comes back at me when I respond to them. There. This went on for a little over an hour that night, and very exciting night. Bill and I, that's the only night that we both got a glimpse of them. Some of the other guys, the Johnson brothers, claimed to have seen them much better than I ever have. I could not give you any detail, but what I seen was, it was bright moonlit night, and it was just shooting through the trees. They were so fast and so agile. It's hard to believe that anything could move that fast and not break something somewhere. But when they break something, it's almost intentional. I feel like when they do break something, it's maybe to see your response. It's not an accident. That's why you hear these big limbs crack. My opinion is, just be still. Let them get the aggressor. If you go out there and try to make something happen, it's probably not going to happen. You got to just be still. This night, when we interacted with them in '74, when I made these recordings, when they started doing this stuff, we just kept doing what we was doing. We just kept fixing our dinner around the stove and eating, laughing, and having a good time. They will come closer to me because they don't know they got your attention. And just be still and let them be the aggressor. They have to be the aggressor. You go out there and try to do something, they'll just take off. And we just need to learn more about what they are. And the more you can get out there and the longer you can stay in the field, the more chances I think you'll have. What I've got back there, this is the I produced this out I did in 1996. And this is the one 2 years later, the same camp, and it was produced in 2003. This is my story. I narrate this. Jonathan Frakes, like I say, Star Trek, we got him to narrate this for a lot of money. I didn't pay myself very much for this. Do I have a question anywhere?
First question.
Yes, Tom.
Did you ever play the recordings and see what happened?
Yes, we have tried that.
Here.
I think they know what you're doing.
Okay. I played them from the rim of Bluff Creek to absolute silence in the middle of the night with my brother one time. And, it didn't evoke even a cricket's response or anything like that. Not even an owl.
Yes, Bo?
Well, I just recently finally heard that, what you guys recorded, and it struck me like it sounded like Chinese or Japanese, almost like a Asian language. So
Yes, there are some spots in it that sound very much like that. It's got a golem sound to it.
I want to make a quick comment about that. The people in the neighborhood when I was a kid, they used to talk about how they would hear Chinese people talking outside all the time at night.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Just like that. I think yours is the only recording.
It had a very oriental thing to it, like a samurai in spots. We have hours of tape that we did over the years up there, trying to get someone to professionally, forensically study this, who has the PhD that we need, and it's been extremely, extremely difficult. Get these people to take this on is almost impossible because they don't want to lose their reputation or why? What do they got to gain other than losing their job? Next question. Yes.
Who has in their possession these original tapes?
I do. Who asked the question?
Al has.
This lady right here.
I'm just curious, have you asked university primatology departments? I was at UCD in the primate department, and as a grad student, we wouldn't have shunned trying to have folks study these, so I'm just kind of curious.
I said I took these to Syntonic back in New York. Prior to that, I took them to UC Davis. And a physical anthropologist there by the name of Jarvis Bastian did some soundgrams.
Yeah.
And he told me right off that these are primate sounds. The question being, what primate?
Yeah.
We have a question over here.
Have you guys tried to play the sounds at a faster or slower speed to see if they actually make some sense?
These are studied in depth, segments of them, over the period of a year at the University of Wyoming by Loren Coleman, his PhD, he's an electronics engineer, and a graduate student who earned a master's based on his study. And the answer to that, your question is yes. Yes.
We have a question right here.
Yeah, the sounds that I heard in 2001 in Skamania County sound like your whoop calls. We had an answer to those calls by coyotes. Did you ever experience that?
We've heard lots of coyotes. These aren't coyote sounds.
Well, I mean, are they ever answered by other animals like coyotes? That's what we heard. We heard the whoop 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 sounds from one end of the valley, and then coyotes from the other side that were like answering them back.
I'm not sure I understand your question in relationship to the sound.
Well, we heard the whoop whoop sounds like you had on your recording. It was very loud, and about a minute later we heard coyotes from a farther distance away, almost like they were answering, responding some way to the call.
Now, the sounds that I recorded, I think the ones Ron, at the time Ron was recording his sounds, I don't think we ever heard any coyote sounds in that area.
Okay, somebody on the other side?
Yeah, right here.
Al and Ron, I didn't catch whether you guys covered this, but can you talk about whether or not you or anyone else is working this area actively now?
We go back there on the average of once or twice a year.
And
Ron doesn't any. What?
Are you getting anything?
Not appreciable, but I'm not really at liberty to say what we have had.
Okay, somebody on this side.
Let me say something else about that. In 1976, Bill and I were up there, and we killed a bear in camp. It was ransacking our food, and I kind of go into this on my second CD here, and I think maybe we heard it, woken up about midnight, and we were woke by these sounds of a Bigfoot, we thought it was. And we thought, then we heard the ransacking our camp, and we thought that, well, if that's a Bigfoot, it can't be anything once, that's unusual, but that's very unusual for them to, they don't ransack, they just study. Anyway, we decided to go out and shine a light, and we did, and it was a bear, we tried to get him off, and those of you who heard the CD know the story, but we ended up, it came back at us, we shot it, we skinned it the next day, ate part of it, we're barbarians. And basically, we've had no close-in stuff since then. Now, we do think they're still around the area, I'm quite sure they are. I want to say something else about when they first come into our camp in 1972, 71, you'd hear a big blowing sound. That was a big, like that. I noticed my horse, he'll do that. The mules will do that. When they had a long tug, they blow. A lot of animals will do that. So I don't think these things are staying right there where we're at. I never have thought that. They come, they know where we're coming, they know they've seen us or know us or something. So somewhere between where we start off from and when we get there, they notice us and climb up there, go there, because it's quite a little effort to get there. And they make this blowing sound. One of them, I think, has asthma.
Me.
You can hear it breathing in one of Al's tapes. I got a little digital enhancement going on with my computer, and you hear. It's a real. Anyway, Jason.
This young lady has a question.
Regarding the whistling noises, have you analyzed, or is it possible to analyze whether they're produced labially or whether they're a vocalization? Because to me they sound really similar to chirps produced by squirrel monkeys.
Yeah, the whistles were analyzed by Curlin, and the whistle you heard from Warren Johnson, and he's the one that says, "Come on, Bigfoot, come on down, don't be such a rascal," you know. It's labial, it comes off the lips. The return on that is we got very, very dramatic harmonics. So it's not produced labially, or it's produced with an instrument. Conceivably, it could be, produced some other way. Does that answer your question?
Somebody from this side.
Well, when we whistle, I can't do it. We whistle off the lips. When we whistle ordinarily, we whistle from the lips. There's no opportunity for the sound to resonate within your vocal chamber or your larynx. The sounds of the whistle you heard, which are unexplained, are harmonic, and those harmonics show up in a voice in a graph. And one of the first indications was from Bastian at UC Davis in the graphs that he made. Does that help? We don't know for sure. We know that the whistle, when we whistle from the lips. There's no resonance indicated in a graph. The other whistle clearly has harmonics.
Thank you.
Written
More than 20 books, more than 300 articles. Please welcome Loren Coleman.
Good afternoon. I hope I didn't lose the audience by putting this up, but I put this up so Jeff Meldrum would smile, and it worked. So today I'm going to talk very explicitly about some questions that I've had in my mind. Oh, well, some questions you've all had in your minds, I hope, and really go over some things that I think we need to talk about if we're talking about Bigfoot as a real animal. I want to state right off the top, like I have in several talks that I've given, I do not believe in Bigfoot. And I want to state that as my position right off the bat. I don't believe in Bigfoot any more than I believe in camels or I believe in elephants. I think belief is the providence of religion. I think if you substitute some of these words, it'll make sense to you. I accept the reality of the possibility of a Bigfoot. So I'm very pro-Bigfoot, but I think that when people start using the word belief, it gets very confusing about what they're talking about. Are they talking about God? Are they talking about faith? Are they talking about evidence? And so what I want to challenge you with my presentation today is really to go beyond where we are in Bigfoot studies. And one of the questions that I've talked to the media all week about is how many Bigfoot babies are born per year? And just conceptually and intellectually start thinking about that question. You have to already be at the place of thinking about Bigfoot as an animal that we accept or deny, or you think it's a myth or whatever, before you can get to the next stage of asking yourself, are there baby Bigfoot? How many are born? What's the population density? What's the breeding cycle? A lot of biological questions that we can ask just as well as ask about the footprints, ask about the diet, about migration patterns, a lot of things that people have done a lot of good work in. Next, please. It's obvious that there's lots of questions already been asked by the tabloids in this area. And you can see here, Bigfoot mating with campers. Well, we hope not, but never can tell. By the way, I liked Tom Powell's presentation this morning, and I want to make sure that everybody knows that I don't have Dockers on, I have Dickies. So, next, please. For those people that like to get more in depth about my presentation, there's a whole chapter in this book called Sex and the Sasquatch. As Tom said, and a lot of us know, the reason we write books is so we can put it all out there, we can share it, and it'll be all in one place. Internet exchanges do not do it. It takes a little bit more than that. So if you want to read more about the presentation I'm going to be giving, here it is in this book. Next, please. The way this all really started, as far as in my mind, was in 1999. I was giving a presentation in Ohio at a conference, and one of the things I did in this book, there's many different drawings. Could I have the next slide, please? That's okay. There's many different drawings like this in the book. And one of the drawings I showed is of a rather effeminate Bigfoot seen in Pennsylvania, a male. One of the things that I showed was this Bigfoot, and I said this was linked to a story in which a man, supposedly a professor, allegedly a professor at a university in Pennsylvania, had said that he'd seen this Bigfoot having sex with a cow. And of course, it was late at night. There weren't that many young people in the audience and all of that. But I got no reaction from the audience about that. I went home, and on the internet, on the email list, you would have thought that I was the butt boy for Bigfoot, because I mean, I'm as straight as anybody, but I can also understand homophobia, and it was all over the internet. Loren Coleman says Bigfoot is gay. Loren Coleman says Bigfoot has sex with cows, and other things like that, which is fine and good. And I thought, there's all kinds of room for everybody to say anything they want about me on the internet and anything about anybody else. But it also brought up for me that people really find it difficult to talk about the sexual behavior of an animal that we all more or less accept as a real possibility. And so I started looking into this, and I got out, my stack of 12 to 24 to 40. It got to be a growing list of every volume I could find on Bigfoot, and the avoidance of the topic of sex was incredible to me. Next, please. And so I wanted to speak a minute about Ivan Sanderson. So I started looking back, and even my mentor here, Ivan Sanderson, who I very much appreciated, and I actually got in the Bigfoot field in 1960 and got in touch with Ivan Sanderson in 1961 when his book came out. He even avoided the topic of Bigfoot, really, because obviously he was coming out of the 50s. And I was sort of shocked that here we were still in this place of the sexuality of Bigfoot being such a taboo. Next, please. What do we know about the sexuality of Bigfoot? Well, apparently, if you read any of these books, hardly anything. And you can see, Sasquatch, Bigfoot can be anywhere from 12 feet to 8 feet tall. But this is not a penis, by the way. Most of the Bigfoot drawings are pretty asexual. And let me just go through a quick demonstration of that. Next, please. Oh, okay. One thing we have to deal with, of course, is that everybody doesn't believe in Bigfoot, despite how you all in this crowd feel. Next, please. And what we have to deal with is, of course, a lot of pretty awful hoaxes. That because of these hoaxes, people are set up to not talk about the reality of Bigfoot or the sexuality of it, but the first line of defense and proactiveness is really around whether this is a creature that exists or not. So I want us to first get beyond that and get into the sexuality. Next, please. If you look at any of the major great apes, any of the books on these great apes, you'll notice that besides them talking about their eating habits and other things like that, they talk about their sexuality. And of course, this book here and some of the things that are coming out of this animal that was formerly called the pygmy chimpanzee is very sexual. And this next picture, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen, you can certainly see there, this is not what the kind of drawings we often see of Bigfoot. This is a very sexual animal, the bonono, that certainly is very aware of its body and wants to show you. Next, please. But this is what could you move that up a little bit? You can see here a major problem that we have to deal with, and I'll give you, I won't read to you, you can just all read it yourself. This is startling, right? How many genitalia do we often see in textbooks for anthropology? Hardly any. Okay, well, how many genitalia do we often see with Bigfoot? Next, please. Let's first start with the classic. Wow, it's the same pose. Next, please. Here we have a wild man from medieval times that even has the oak leaves. So it started then and continues on. Next, please. Here's another one, hiding the old genitalia. This is something I discovered that I talk about in my book from the Depression era. This is a fruit crate label. No pun intended with the fruit crates. So just hold. The fruit crate labels actually were created mostly of non-fiction subjects so that produce auctioneers could see from far away what was going on. This was produced in a time in California during the 20s and 30s where we had found no articles on Bigfoot, but I was able to discover this, and it actually, because it's I talked to a lot of fruit crate label aficionados, they said this is one of the few fruit crate labels that actually has a picture of itself in the label. So I was able to exactly measure the foot of this creature as 22 inches long. Next, please. But you can see it's that pose again. Or this is a 8.5-foot recreation of Bigfoot from Minnesota that now is in my front porch I had to cut a hole in the top of my ceiling because it was so tall. But here again, this is a recreation that shows no sexuality. Next, please. And we know, of course, this is how much shyer could the circumcast Bigfoot be? We don't see anything there. Next. You see this pose over and over again. Go ahead, Tim. Put the next one. There's Craig's conference there in Texas, and you have the same pose once again. This is from a French individual, Michel René, and this is a Yeti, and you can see it drifts over into Yeti too, this pose. Next. So back to these drawings. Here you have a situation where over and over again, when there's pictures of quote-unquote prehistoric man or fossil apes or Bigfoot, over and over again, people are not really dealing with the reality that this is a sexual animal. Despite British and French and everyone in Europe saying they're so sexually liberated, you will find the same thing going over there that you will in prudish America. Upside down? Oh no, this is the political one. Oh. We always knew that Bill O'Reilly had no sexual organs. Anyway, next one. Despite his tapes. So back here we are again. This is extremely important, I think, because before we really understand that there is a sexuality of Bigfoot, we need to really realize that we're dealing with a prejudice and a taboo that goes way beyond the Bigfoot field. And next. Could you, center that? What you start noticing, if you get in some anthropology texts, you'll start seeing that not the drawings, but some of the, especially if you're a 13-year-old boy and looking at your mother's National Geographics, you'll start noticing that there is some sexuality out there, and there is a reason to start talking about. Next, please. This is a chimpanzee. This is a pretty bad overhead. But you can see that what mostly happens in the real world is that sexuality is right out there. Chimpanzees with erect penises, they go around. Maybe they're called wadus. Maybe that's what the thing was saying. Anyway, they are really right out there as a display technique. And I'm sure that there's a lot of anthropologists and some primatologists nicely write me letters, and it is quite an exciting times because when I was growing up, most people didn't even consider Bigfoot worthy of study. But now we know there's lots of stuff going on out there that we can look at. One of the things, next, if we start looking at some of the ancient drawings for human beings, we start seeing that there's a lot of sexuality in those. Why have we lagged so far behind with primates that are called Bigfoot? There is some even people in Europe who believe that the satyrs and a lot of the other primitive quote-unquote mythology of hairy beings and goat men and different things like that may be forms of Bigfoot or related to Bigfoot. And there's a lot of sexuality. But most of it is really hidden away in medieval literature and some of these kinds of erotic art. We are a prudish culture. Since the industrial age, we have really hidden our genitalia. If you look at most of the ancient cultures, most of the Renaissance and before, you'll notice that there was lots of sexuality. So our reflection of Bigfoot is no more than a reflection of us right now. And we really need to go beyond looking at Bigfoot as a bigger human being and look at it as an ape or as a primitive human or whatever word you want to use to understand that we have to look at the biology of it. Next, please. These are just, go ahead, next. what I started doing with the artists that I've been working with is to try to come up with a more realistic picture of what these creatures may look like. This, of course, is the quote-unquote Minnesota Iceman, which is just another way to look at a Bigfoot-type creature. Interestingly, some people believe that this is a form of Homo erectus. Say that 3 times real quick. Anyway, and one thing we do know is that gorillas have very small penises, whatever. Anyway, human beings actually have a larger penis, and this is probably like in Autumn's presentation, because human males want to be better than any other great ape. But there is something to the fact that it's about time we show this. And in the next one, I know in my field guide I got a lot of grief for putting in mermaids because the publisher wanted me to. But one thing that I did try to do is in some of the tales, and this is the Yowdy from Australia. And for our Australian people in the audience, it is true that they have been reported carrying quote-unquote tools. But they also have been seen very close up, and their sexuality has been noticed. Oh my God, who's that? This is where Jeff gets to come in. No. This is Anne Marie. We all know Anne Marie from the quote-unquote Playboy video, which I think Jeff quite properly, because if anybody was going to pay attention to this, needed to be renamed. And I talk about that process in my book. We all now know it today as the Redwoods video. And the Redwoods video shows that you cannot get any credibility in this field. And I have been taken to task for some reason for even talking about this subject. But anyway, you can't get any credibility in this field if you stay with some of the things like calling something a Playboy or Playmate video. What is intriguing about this video, which apparently this young lady, and in England I showed her, by the way, without any clothes, but I thought I'd give you a break. Anyway, next please. In the video, and this is kind of somebody's drawing from the video, there's something that appears in this video that we haven't really seen that often. And anybody have a guess what that is? Next, please. Well, there it is. There it is. That's the Bigfoot penis. And it's something that people have really avoided talking about. If you look back at Albert Osmond's kidnapping, or, camper camping, whatever you want to call it, he talked about the penis of that Bigfoot looking like a horse's penis with a funnel and different things like that. You don't see that description in too many books. People really have avoided the whole incident of Albert Osmond that involved the sexuality. In my book, I talk about how interesting it is to me that we indeed have this ongoing myth that Bigfoot and Sasquatch are all over North America kidnapping Indian maidens, when in fact the data shows that most of the kidnappings, whether they're alleged or whether they're tales or whether they're folklore, have talked about juvenile to older male Bigfoot kidnapping male humans, taking them back to their encampments or family groups or whatever you want to call them, and sort of dumping them out there to present to a female Sasquatch. Is it because there's not enough breeding population among the Sasquatch? Is it because there's homosexuals? No, I don't. There's no priest. We know that. So anyway, but we do know that this is one of the misportrayals, that the Indian maidens, the male Bigfoot, that kidnapping has occurred, when in fact, if we look at it, it's a different kind of record. Next, please. The other thing that is seen all the time and talked about much easier, and I agree here with Autumn that this is a male-dominated field, and so it's much easier for us to talk about breasts. Bigfoot breasts and all of that. This is the William Rowe drawing that his daughter had done of the creature that he had seen. And you can see there a very prominent breast of possibly young to a little bit older, older juvenile female Sasquatch. It's no problem for guys to talk about this, but they don't go beyond that. Besides the descriptiveness and his description of the breast, nobody talks about were these nursing mothers, was the Patterson Bigfoot possibly an older female, was she a younger female, was she one that had just given birth? You've read some of those things, but nobody takes it beyond that. Nobody really thinks beyond what's going on in a superficial descriptive way. Next, please. Then we have things like this, which get all of us in trouble. I wrote a column in this on Bigfoot, and you would not have believed what grief the editors at Fate got from publishing this picture. And this is, of course, a classic. It's, R. Crumb, and I believe there's some people from Seattle selling copies of this issue back there. But it's obvious that we can kind of play around with Bigfoot breast a little bit more. Next, please. And human beings, of course, have shown the human breast a lot more than they have shown the human penis. And here's some Willendorf. You want to show the next one too? These are different things we have that obviously show the female human. And next, please. Do they all look like the Patterson Bigfoot with hair? I don't know. Next, please. Or do they look like this? This is a human female. And we need to really open our eyes to the different forms of human beings and their breasts. All the breasts are not Playboy bunnies. And we need to start looking at some of these breasts to associate and compare them with Bigfoot. What are we learning about Bigfoot and their sexuality? Next. Could you flip that the other way? I think she was going the other way. Of course, M.K. Davis has done a great job, and I think that anybody that really reviews his stuff and his blow-ups are quite enamored with him. And here you can see pretty clearly, at least I can't up here because I'm too close, but further back, that here we have the best piece of evidence that we have. We have a sighting, we have smell, we have a film, and we have footprints, all in one place. Nobody is going to do any better than this until that lumber truck hits a Bigfoot. And in this one case, as opposed to all of the male sightings, and you'll see the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot redrawn as a male over and over again, but it's a female. It's a female. What do we know about her? We don't know much. Why have we been afraid to speculate? Next. And according to MK, he says there's 3 nipples. I don't see it, but, MK sees a lot of things that sometimes I don't see, but he also has done us a great service by at least enhancing these. 3 nipples are not unknown among males and females, by the way, of course. Here's one of the pygmy chimps showing that breasts are pretty prominent there. One of the problems that Ivan Sanderson had with the Patterson film right off the bat, and also Heuvelmans did too, was that there was hair on the breast. But we know that there's actually, and I talk about this in my book, that all human females have hair on their breasts. It may not be a lot of hair. It may be, some of us think it's too much. But anyway, there is hair on the human breast. And there's no reason that in some populations of Sasquatch that it couldn't be. If you think about it, that was in October, before the season may be changing. There may be an increased hair cover. Next, please. There's also sexual activity that may be out there for us to hear about. Anybody know about the Glenn Thomas encounters, in which his sightings talked about actually seeing females mutually masturbating each other, and there was some large cries that were heard in the valley. And so we don't really know what's out there in the bush, but we do know that we should start looking. and we should start looking with the examples we have in the primate world and with the possibilities that some of these sounds that you may have heard today may have been orgasmic, but nobody's thought to look at them that way perhaps. I have not come across any good reports, despite David Sheehy in Florida with his 12-inch penis. I haven't got any good reports of anybody seeing any copulation, any intercourse between one Bigfoot and another. But one thing that I always point out, you guys are all I'm preaching to the choir, so to speak, but among the general population, when I talk to them about Bigfoot, I have to remind them that a sighting of a Bigfoot is like this much out of the slice of life of a Bigfoot. This is an extremely extraordinary encounter with an animal that probably is doing something that's not exactly normal. A Bigfoot crossing a road, a Bigfoot taking a poop in the woods so that Matthew Johnson can see it, is probably not the normal everyday activity of this creature. This creature probably does, 99.9% of the time, it's doing things that humans do not see. And if you think about what's happened in the Bigfoot field, is we've strung together all of these incredible sightings that may have nothing to do with the day-to-day life of this animal and said, this is what it does. That is so strange. If you think about that in terms of the wildlife biologists that I've talked to about mountain lion, I've spent 40 years in the woods myself. The animals that present themselves to us are not doing what they normally do. We may see little snatches of what they're, we may see little parts of what they're doing, but we don't really know. And I think we have to keep going back to that and challenging ourselves, what kind of assumptions, what kind of nuances of their behavior are we missing by saying that this is what this creature does, this is what this creature eats. We really need to respect that we don't know that much about them. It always takes a human and a Bigfoot to have a sighting, but it doesn't take a human to have the Bigfoot live day to day. This is, as you can see at the bottom, in the 1940s, in British Columbia, this was a tourist item that was put out. And I'm just using it to illustrate the fact, back to my original question, how many Bigfoot babies are born every year? We need to think about the population density. We need to think about where these animals are. I would agree, even though I'm an East Coaster and have lived in San Francisco and in the Midwest a lot of my life, I am realistic to know that the key core population is in the Pacific Northwest. If there's 1,500 to 4,000, if there's a breeding population of maybe only 1/6 of those, if the sexual maturity is between 6 and 15 years, if they die at the age of 30. In other words, we need to start asking questions like that and figuring out where this is leading us. If you think it's silly to ask the question, how many Bigfoot babies are born this year, then you really are saying it's silly to think about this creature being real. And that's what I go back to. Back to this for a minute. Ivan Sanderson and a few other people have collected sightings of little Bigfoot, which were probably young. But if you look in the records, most of the sightings of our older juveniles and older Bigfoot. And so, where are all the babies? Where are the young? Where are the young footprints? Where are the little footprints? Have people been skipping, taking casts of something that's 12 inches long or 10 inches long or 8 inches long that Jeff Meldrum could look at and say, that's a big footprint. But because they're so small, they've been assuming they're human. And when you're out there in the woods and you see something that small, you ignore it. We need to open our eyes and look for things beyond what is supposedly the Bigfoot model. Next, please. So, just to end this is kind of a normal picture that you'd see at a preserve in Africa or a zoo. And there are babies out there. There are Bigfoot babies. And it's time for us to really say how many are there. So thank you very much. questions? Daniel, that's a statement. You say there's more sightings in the East Coast. Okay. I do not see, the question is, why do I see more sightings, more population density in the Pacific Northwest versus the East? Just because there are more sightings in the East does not mean to me that those are credible, verifiable numbers. I find that a lot of East Coast people, a lot of Florida, up through New Brunswick, may have accounts, may have encounters. I think a lot of people make mistakes in the East. And I have always seen the most trustworthy, credible sightings really are from Northern California to Southern Alaska. And so I base it upon my experience of looking and reading these reports and interviewing the witnesses. So, yeah, I mean, I was doing this. Ivan Sanderson said I was his man in the East because he couldn't find anybody else to look into the East Coast sightings. But just because I'm attuned to the East does not mean that I think that that's where the Bigfoot is. I, in fact, think that a lot of people see everything from Angus cows to bears and call them Bigfoot in the East. Mr. Bobo.
Have you, like, we've all heard, like, the old stories about that Indian maiden or whoever being raped by a male. Have you ever heard of a female doing it, like, to a male human, a female Sasquatch?
I've heard people have asked me that a lot, actually. I think it's perhaps technically pretty difficult to do, although I'd volunteer. The stories seem less verifiable than the ones of just the kidnappings of the males. So.
That's us, I mean. Is that too loud back there? Almost. Okay, turn it on. That's okay.
Tell them that owls don't echo.
Yeah, owls don't echo, by the way. This has a harmony of sound, if you've ever heard it. Owls, the harmony that is there and the echo, again, is unique to, I think, whatever's out there. And the owls, we've had people analyze it. It's not an owl. Okay, well, we had some more, but that gives you an idea of the sound that's coming out of that. I thought we'd just have a little brief audience interaction. I want to know if anybody else has heard rock knocking going on back in the forest.
Quite a few.
Somewhat similar? Pardon?
The hoot.
The hoots like that? Okay. All right. Has anybody else heard those kind of like melodic calls?
I've heard the same thing in a lot of the howl, or the supposed owl type call. I heard that a lot.
Really? In Ohio? Very similar to this?
That is exact.
Really? It's amazing. It's nice to have some continuity, isn't it? Yeah, science. Yeah.
California.
Pardon?
California, New Mexico, I've heard it.
Really? Same thing, okay. It's beautiful. I mean, it's that tonal quality is something that they say humans just can't do. Say humans just can't do that well, that kind of tonal quality. Now, if you have the lights for a second, there's a little game we're going to play here on rocks. We brought some rocks just to make you appreciate, we think, what we're taking to do that. And if we were to take this normal rock that we have in the backyard people would use, it just doesn't have the volume or the noise. But if we take these rocks, which we find the size, this is about the size, when you hear this now, that starts to sound like what you've heard out there. Now another secret is, these cannot be sedimentary rocks. They got to be the igneous rocks, otherwise they break apart in just a matter of moments. So that's something else we thought about, looking at the geology of the area. If they've been shale or something else, they were completely shattered after the first impact. But he went on and on with those. And if you can imagine a creature that size, they will lift these rocks. It would have taken that to do it. And it wasn't done on the ground. Because that would have absorbed it. You couldn't print what you heard. So we think that was kind of interesting analysis, kind of science related instead. So that's what we did.
And by the way, this creature was moving around with these rocks. We don't assume that it was just finding rocks along as he's walking, or it's walking, and just making these noises. So to palm these rocks and walk around with them and make these noises is astronomical. So
yeah. Okay. Any other questions about that event? Or?
Why are they walking around, banging the rocks together? Communicating with each other? Are they warning each other of us?
Well, it's pretty obvious from the place where the loggers were. They wanted them out of there, and it worked very well. I think it's a way. They test you whenever you go into an area, and you know that they test you all the time. They'll test to see what you're made out of, and if you finally don't leave, they accept the fact that you're there, and that may take a while, and they'll even sometimes become a little friendly. So they test you out first. If they can scare the hell out of you, that's fine with them. They don't want you around anyway. So I kind of think that's what they were doing out there. Okay, let's go to the second one here. The second one. If we can divide it in half, let's try to do it. If we can't, we'll just play it through. This is pretty fantastic. You're going to hear stick knocking going on in about 3 episodes. You'll first hear a couple of high mewing noises, like high little screams, and then you're going to hear a campfire popping, and then you're going to head and you'll hear the wood striking, and then after that you're going to hear some call. You're going to hear you put a call out, Doug, and then you do, and then Sing is going to answer him. Just within moments, you're going to hear the creature answer him after that second call. So. If you want to, we could just play it right through. Play it right now. That'll save time.
Yeah, it's on. Okay.
Campfire. Nice and quiet. Have some patience. We'll get there.
Okay, we just got some wood knocking up on the mountainside to our left.
That's us.
That was me doing a hoot.
Mm-hmm.
It's 12:30 at night and we're getting yells. That was Doug.
That was me doing the yell. As I say, call blasting, we don't use that. We use our own voice or a cone. And, usually we get a response, and sometimes it's not a good response, but sometimes it could be a wood knock, trees, rock knocks, yells, hoots, and it works. And as you heard, you will hear it again when you'll hear my voice and you get a response.
I'm going to do yell.
That's impressive.
There you go. Yeah, that was impressive. Some distance away. You're going to hear more of that. So you can see what brings us back into these areas. It's kind of neat. Okay. The next one here is, let's get this right here. Okay, now, I don't know how we want to do this. This is kind of a neat one, kind of humorous. I'll let these guys describe what went on. It was a very dark night. And what you're going to hear is you're going to hear a tree coming down. And this is preceded by something getting close to it. You won't hear much of the tree, but the response is great. It's about a 2-minute tape, and a lot of it in the first is just you sound like a little chipmunk running around, and it's these guys playing around at night. So, all right.
This is my first time having a camera recorder, and I was going to try it out. Same area again, and we're sitting in our car. Nothing was happening with our windows down, and it was so dark that it was too scary just to stand out there. So we also heard these low kind of noises. And we're going, okay, are we really hearing that? And so I yelled out, and it stopped. So, all right, we got the foot going on. So we jumped out of the car. I started recording, and this is what you'll hear. What you're hearing there is a light. I got a light going like this, and the battery's rattling around.
I saw that.
If you hear, listen real close, you hear a big rock hit a tree. Oh, it might pull. That's what we heard first.
Might be coming up behind us.
There he goes again.
Mm-hmm. Go.
Here comes the tree.
Holy shit!
Sorry, that was me. Yeah, big tree, good size. What to say about this size? Coming down, and it was the middle of the dark. And Darrold and I just, you would just done the same thing. Not stay and go. Maybe like 100 yards. Yes, I mean, it was close. It took this rock, hit it, and that's where you heard us. It started bringing the tree down. And that's when we got out there.
No wind.
No wind, and it was calm. It was about 2 years ago, about mid-October. Cold, clear night.
And this isn't the first time you've heard trees come down,
no,
is it? You've heard several of them in there.
Several, but this not as big as this tree.
Not as graphic, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It had to be granddaddy.
Okay. The fourth tape we have now is, I think, one of the best ones we've had. Very fortunate to be able to record about 10 calls coming in from the same area over a period of about an hour, from 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning. Like typically dark again. And what you're going to hear is you're going to hear a couple of calls, siren-like calls, almost identical to the one that answered him. You'll have to listen to it pretty, because my tape was down low, and then you're going to hear a lot of tape noise and knocking, very unprofessional. But you'll hear that, and then we'll have a narrative. They're going to hear some barking, much closer range. These calls are about 3/4 of a mile away, we figure. The next ones are probably only several hundred yards away. It's a younger one coming down, we think, barking at us. Then we'll go back into the tape of the noises, and toward the end they'll get pretty loud, and they go for a long time. So let's go ahead and have it.
Nineteenth.
19th of April.
And there's three of us.
2003.
There's three of us here.
Three of us here. We just heard 4 loud vocalizations and 2 groans.
Yeah, I think in this case I got 3 of those. Okay, very good. Okay.
We're in the company of John Andrews, who's doing the taping, and Nancy Smith and Richard Grover. And there's nobody up here but us.
And all the frogs are completely quiet.
The frogs just quit croaking.
It's kind of an overcast night.
Last night.
Very still.
Still, no breeze.
Okay, good.
Vocalizations occurred around 1 o'clock in the morning, and we also heard what sounded like 2 children chattering back and forth and yelling at each other.
As well as a couple of low moans.
Low moans. You know.
Shut it up. Because I'm going to respond. Shut it up. Oh my God. It's a good one. God damn. Communicating with us. So we're about to enter a little saga here, and we've heard close to 8 vocalizations. All
Again, you could hear the repetition in the sounds, very similar. But you were hearing my tape recorder. You know, you're out there and it was hitting against it, so you heard the tape drive going on. That was the mechanical sounds you heard. But what was interesting was, again, for over an hour we heard these sounds. But the most convincing thing to me was they were about 10-minute intervals apart. You'd hear them, and at one interval, this thing had moved, we think, over a mile away. You could hear them up in the valley here, and then there was a typical quietness. Now, you could hear everything. If somebody was in a car, they'd drive a car down a dark mountain road and go a mile. And over by a mile away, there were 2 more calls as this thing left the valley. So that convinced me more than anything that something's up there that can move through the forest very well. And you could say that, someone's up there with a call blaster. That convinced me that wasn't a call blaster up there. So anyway, it was a very exciting evening, and we had a report, a National Institute of Discovery Sciences out of Nevada, I think it is, took enough interest that they did a vocal tract analysis of the tape. And I'll just read a couple of excerpts from that, which I thought were pretty good. They say here that these sounds had been produced by a large body, and that the pattern of formant dispersion, I think this means the mechanics of the noise that they heard, is not conclusively human, and that these formant patterns result in a longer vocal tract length than that for human males. If produced by a human male, then an explanation would need to be sought for why the set of vocalizations consistently represent outliers, meaning at the very extended range of human possibility. Finally, they said, one production, one event, failed to fall within any ellipse fit to human data, indicating that these vocalizations were very unusual. So we were able to finally get a little science out of all this, and it's right here in the report. One last thing. Got a few minutes? A sign. This is a sign that I saw when I went to the area. I thought something was unusual about it, and I made the take it without being illegal about it. We replaced it with another one. This is a bridge clearance sign. You often see them on both sides of bridges. When I drove by that night, I thought that looks unusual. It was riveted to the top, and the bottom had a bullet in it. You can see the pattern of it. And you'll see a lot of striations here of where this has been under pressure. And let's show them what this sign looked like probably maybe a year before or 6 months before. This is the best we could do.
This is what I discovered when I found it. We thought it was very unusual. This was rolled up like a piece of newspaper or something. Just to say where it was. It was around like that. And there was some fingerprints on both sides of this, big, huge fingerprints. And of course, they couldn't be lifted off the metal. We tried that. It didn't work too good. But we thought it was pretty evident that something with big hands rolled that up. And we thought, well, it could be somebody that's crazed up here or something, because who could pop that rivet and roll that sign up like a newspaper?
I've got the sign here if anybody wants to try it. Certainly can try. What's interesting to remember, too, when you've got metal, you've got to go far beyond its stress point to have it fall back into that pattern. So the thing had to be rolled up even tighter than that to spring back into that position. Well, the Forest Service hasn't got any money, so somehow they straightened it back up and put a bolt in the bottom. But to go ahead and rip that off in the rivet and to roll that up, I think was very unusual. And to find the large fingerprints told us something unusual had gone on. So I wanted that, so I went ahead and got another sign at night and went back and put another sign that looked better than that and brought this home. So anyway, here's the sign. And there's nothing on the back to indicate that anything mechanical had been used to roll it up. And I think that was an important factor.
What's that question and answer?
Yeah.
That was succinct, please.
Yes. Yes, Autumn.
I just snuck in a little while ago. I wanted to ask John, on the recording equipment, can you reiterate what recording equipment did you guys use? And in the recordings, it seems to be a compilation of several recordings, and I noticed that the very front end of the recordings is not there. Can you describe the very first part of the vocalizations to us, please?
Well, these guys had actually done the earlier vocalizations. All I can say is when you're out there, and as you all know, when the sound first starts, it takes several seconds to get a tape recorder going. You've been sitting there for hours sometimes months. It's cold out there. And so it's very cold out there, and you've got your finger on the trigger of a tape recorder, it plays. And so you're out there and all of a sudden the sound starts and there's been hours of boredom, right? And so it takes a while to get that on. So a lot of these sounds, we missed several seconds to begin with. So you know how long those went. Well, you add on 3 or 4 seconds onto that, you've got an awful long sound going on. This is what I made up and what I do use. It's just nothing more than a reflector that you can buy for a light. I got a fairly inexpensive mic that you can turn on that's got a projection mode, and I just made this up. So you can get this sort of thing, and believe me, when you put that on, you can pinpoint anything that's out there right down to the exact location. You get it. We hook it up to an old analog tape recorder, and you got to get one that'll go down to the low ranges. Most of the cheap ones are only made for, when you're taping something at a conference. And I've got a good Sony. At one time, the sound goes, ooh, and you could hear that noise from all that way around, and you could hear that deep guttural noise. And that was, like I say, 3/4 of a mile away.
John Thomas has got a question.
Yeah, John, I was just wondering, you said at the beginning that there were logging crews in the area and they had left. Do you know for absolutely sure that there were no men left those camps, those logging operations?
All we can tell you is there's a quarry, which was a favorite place to hang out, and that's where those noises had come from, the rock knocking that frightened them so badly. Again, we were there for a year and a half and never appeared again.
Okay, and you never saw no signs of work crews or anything around
the
area at the time?
I wasn't there. They can answer that question. There is, unfortunately, there's logging going on now. They've destroyed a lot of the area that we've been in. Mm-hmm. So from time to time, there are logging crews up there, but during that time there weren't. And again, we've never seen them spend the night there.
They weren't there at the time you made these recordings?
No. When we were there was nobody else there but us. And there was no equipment there either at the time.
Yeah. Question for you both, and also for the audience. You had mentioned heightened sensory perception or heightened senses. Has there ever been a blind researcher or anyone who's grown up with a heightened sense of auditory senses out there, or has anyone ever made an attempt to talk to anyone who would be remotely even interested in going out? The audience.
Good thought.
It's a good idea. Like you say, they may even be better than you are when they're out there listening to what's going on. I'll just say one last thing. There's also been rock falls coming down from there. There's a mountainside there, and for over 3 hours, I listened to it sound like thunder coming down that mountainside every 10 minutes, and you could hear this thing go on. It was large rocks coming down the mountain. Something was up there observing me. I was by myself. Kind of wish I hadn't been after that. But and that went on for like 3 hours. So it's an unusual area. Thank you.
One thing that I would like to add here that I'm aware of, I used to carry around with me back in the 60s a tape recording of Roger Patterson, the screams that, he mimicked. You probably heard him, Autumn. And I don't have a copy of them anymore. They all got lost in the shuffle. But these are the same sounds that he was trying to mimic. And the reason I know that is because at the end of the screams, there was this umph, umph, umph. And it, it struck home. This is the kind of sound they make. You have a question?
That sound you guys are trying to imitate is like a bull elk.
Bull elk?
They make that sound every September.
Mm-hmm. Not what was on this tape, though, right?
No, but one sound on your tape sounded like a howl that we have around here.
Well, we don't know for sure about that, but we thought it was very strange because he had made all those noises with the batting on the tree, and then we heard that long hooting sound, and I've heard that several times. Don't know for sure. I can't say because I didn't see it, but anyway, that was convincing enough to me that this is what we were dealing with. The sound. It was just like Roger Patterson made on this tape and tried to mimic that. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a real quick comment. In, I don't know, 2000, I was in Northern California, and I had something come up and scream at my truck from about 15 feet away. Never had I ever heard that sound on a recording until you and I met up in Washington, Rich, and you played these sounds for me, and that is exactly what I heard, and it was so loud, it was like somebody screaming at me through a bullhorn on football. And that's why I'm so impressed with these recordings, because I personally heard that sound up very close.
Well, that's interesting, and that wah 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 sound, it was like a young one was being sent down like a sentry to scope us out and find out what we were doing there, because it came within from here to the back of the room. It came real close, and then when it seemed like it discovered what we were doing, it just run off in the woods. And then right after that, the big one that was making the big noise, he yelled a couple more times, and he was heading out through the valley.
It was almost like saying, okay, I've had enough of you guys. See you later. So, thank you very much.